In today's video we're going to do some mindful meditation stitching. Hi everyone, Sarah from Homfray Embroidery. Welcome to another video. So it's nearly the end of January 2025 and we haven't done any slow stitching yet. So I thought we would do a little bit today, but we'll take it to another level and we'll do some meditation stitching. So some meditation scrolls and some mindful meditation stitching. So to explain what that is, I've got some here. So I'm going to show you what it is. I'm going to show you how it's different from slow stitching because it is different. I'm going to show you how to make one and then we'll look at a few of these pieces. We'll unroll them and have a little look at them as well. So this kind of stitching is really about being connected with your fabric and your thread. We're not going to make anything particularly. We're not going to design anything. We're not going to do any embroidery. We're going to do just one stitch and we're going to do just that one stitch on some fabric and make a scroll out of it. Now, what's the point of that? I hear you ask. So I started slow stitching a couple of years ago. If you haven't found the joys of slow stitching yet, do check out our slow stitching playlist. We'll put that up at the end of this video and you can go and check that out because it's a really lovely thing to do just to relax into some stitching. If you're new to stitching, it's a really good way of getting into it and connecting with your fabrics and your materials and using them and how to handle them and what they feel like in your fingers. So with these meditation scrolls, with this mindful stitching, we're going to go even further than that and take away the different stitches in it and just do this one stitch like I said. So I'm just going to show you this one here. So this is one that I've done and there's two fabrics in this. And I'll talk about fabrics that you can use in a second. But you can just see this one stitch. I've just got running stitch all the way through. I've changed the direction of it. And it's about just doing that stitch. It's about feeling what that feels like with the fabric. And this is turned into quite a beautiful tactile piece of fabric. It's quite a thick piece now. And it's really lovely just to do this with and just to connect me back with my materials. I felt I'd lost that connection a little bit and been told, you know, cover everything up and don't touch it and once you've stitched it. So this is really nice to be allowed to do that and just to have a feel and just be connected with my material. So it's just one stitch and it's just this mindful act of doing this one stitch and one stitch only. You don't have to think about the stitch. It's not complicated. I haven't got to work any difficult sequences out and how to stitch. It's one stitch and it's just the action of going in and out of the fabric, and you can just do that repetitively and you can just concentrate on what you're doing and you can just be still and be quiet and just enjoy the actual act of just stitching. So I want to just quickly explain the difference between that and slow stitching. So that is just one stitch, so that's just about the single stitch, and I'll show you these two scrolls later. We'll unroll those and have a look at that, and I've got a couple of other pieces I want to show you as well. So this is a slow stitch scroll. So this is a little bit different in that we've got all these different fabrics on here. So I've made a lot of decisions about this. I've been thinking about it a lot and been patching different fabrics and trying different stitches. There's a lot more going on with that, and I'm still connected with my materials and my fabric, but that one is about different stitches and trying different things out. If I just show you the other side, you can see that. So you can see it's more complicated really. So it's still mindful and it's still really fun to do. And I've still got that connection, but I'm making quite a lot of decisions with this, whereas with the mindful scroll, it's just really about that motion of the stitch through the fabric. So we're just simplifying this down even further. So that's a slow stitched one. Put that there. And then I just want to mention this one as well. So this is a sensory slow stitch kind of a project. So this one you can find on my other channel, so Sarah Homfray Creates. I'll put a link up for that one as well, and I show you how I made this book. So this is about lots of different textures. We've got buttons and we've got lace. There's a little shell on there as well, and different patterns of fabric, some stitches on there as well, some little bits of fabric that come up, come away. So it's really sensory one, so you can just enjoy playing with this and touching and feeling this one. So this one's slightly different again, less again about stitching and more about the materials, this one. So that's my sensory book, so do go and check that one out on the other channel if you're interested in how to make that. That is my slow stitching scroll. I'll roll that up again later. And these are my meditation scrolls. So we're not going to do those, we're going to do some meditation scrolls. So let me show you how to make one. So I'm just going to show you around this one. It's quite long. I'll show you to the front camera. You can make it any size you want, and I've seen people do these before and they've done big ones, and they say a big one is important because that gives you lots of chance to really get into it. If it's too short, you finished it and you've not been very mindful. So some people say do big ones and other people say do small ones because they're a bit more achievable and you can get something done. So you can choose how big you do it. So I've done this quite long one, and I've got on the back just a fairly plain fabric on the back there, and then I've just put a different fabric on the front, and I've done it the whole length of this. It's one piece of fabric, and I just had that one little scrap of material that I just put on just as a bit of interest, really. But I don't want you to go too mad with the different fabrics, because it's not about that, then that's in a slow stitching realm. So it's really about one fabric. So you could use a fabric that's important to you. Maybe you made some clothing and you had some fabric left. Maybe you made a quilt and you've got a little bit of leftover fabric, or you've got a vintage one that you've had for a long time, or somebody's given you a piece of fabric that's important. I think you need a connection with that fabric. So it needs to be something that you enjoy looking at, or you enjoy the touch of, or the feel of, or it's got a sentimental reason to it. I think something like that is better, and that means a little bit more when you're stitching it. So I suggest finding yourself a backing fabric and then putting another piece of fabric on top. You can do it on a single layer, but I didn't enjoy that so much because I found it was a little bit floppy. I quite liked something a bit firmer. So I've just got a couple of pieces of fabric here that would be suitable. So this is just a little bit of linen. Maybe you've got an old linen shirt that you don't want anymore, or a bag, or some bedding, or something like that. You can just take a strip from that. This is a little bit of cotton. This is a calico cotton that I used to back my embroideries with. This is a little bit I've got left over. Something natural. Natural fabrics are much nicer. You don't want to be fighting your fabric when you're making one of these. You want something that feels really nice in your hands. So linen or a cotton or a blend of the both is really great. Have a look and see if you've got something in your house, an old cotton tea towel or an old pillowcase or something like that, if you don't have any materials that you can use for this. And then all you're going to do is put the two pieces of fabric together. So this is the one that I'm just going to start to show you. So I've got my cotton backing there, and I've got a little piece of fabric on the top that I've made the same width as it. I'm not worrying about the edges. I'm not folding it under and doing nice seams. That's not what this is about. This is just about this stitching and this connection with the fabric and the thread. This is an old dress that I had that I really loved, and it kind of had a few incarnations. I took the top off and made a skirt, but eventually it had to go. But so I'm using the fabric now for slow stitching, but it's got this lovely pattern on it that I really like. It's a nice fine cotton as well. Really lovely to feel in the finger. So I'm going to use that. If you don't have a piece that's long enough, if you want to do a long scroll, you can do just a short piece if you want to. It's absolutely fine. You can just add another piece of fabric on. So this is another dress that I had. And there's a little bit of fabric from that, so I'm just going to add that one on, and you can just build up your layer like that if you want to, and just keep adding bits of fabric on the to the end of it. So you need to stitch with something, so I'll pull some threads in. So I quite like using something that doesn't strand, that doesn't come apart, because then you've got to think about tension, and then we're not being mindful about it, we're just getting cross with it. So I tend to steer clear of stranded cottons for this, but you can use stranded cottons if you want to. I quite like sashiko threads, so this is for Japanese embroidery, and I'll show you some a sample of that in a second. So this is a nice sort of quite thick thread. It's very strong thread, and it doesn't separate. You just come in one piece, you use it as it is, so you're not thinking about keeping the tension nice and together with the different fibres. It will just stay together, so I quite like using that. That is a cotton one. This is a polyester one, which I might try actually on this one, see what that one's like. So those are both sashiko threads, or you could use a perle thread. That's quite nice. That's twisted. Again, that doesn't separate out. You just use that as it is, and it's really nice and strong for this. And I've also got a cotton abroader as well, which I do like cotton abroader. This is much finer, so if you wanted to do a nice fine one and a fine fabric, you could use something like that. So that's my recommended threads, but you can just have a dig around in your stash and see what you've got, but don't use something that you're going to get really cross with. Because that will be defeating the idea of the object. So something that you enjoy working with and that you know is not going to be a problem to stitch with. So there's a couple of ways that you can start this. If you want to fasten your two pieces of fabric together like we would do in slow stitching, you can just baste them together, nice big stitches just to hold them together while you stitch it. I wouldn't recommend doing this with pins in it, because you stick the pins in you and It's not very nice. So if you want to just baste or tack those together, just an ordinary sewing cotton, you can do nice big stitches. I'll just show you this sample here. It's a little one that I've done. Nice big stitches just all the way around the edge, and that just gives you one piece of fabric, and then you're just thinking about your stitching. So you can baste it together if you want to, or if you just want to go straight in and stitch, you can go straight in and stitch. So I'm going to try that. We'd normally baste them, but let's see if this works for me. So I'm going to try my polyester sashiko thread. I think that colour's quite nice, and hopefully you can see that nice and clearly. I'm going to put a knot in the end. You don't have to, you can just leave the end if you want to. And I'm just going to do a quilter's knot because you get a really nice tiny knot. Round it twice. I'm going to pull it back down between my thumb and my finger, pull through. We get a really nice fine knot with that. I'm just going to separate my two pieces. I'm just going to come up between the two. And then I'm just going to start doing my running stitch. Now I can go back and forth, or I can go up and down. I'm going to go back and forth just to start it off. And I'm going to do this in my hand. Doing it in a frame sort of adds all these other elements of tension in there, really, and it's nice to do it handheld. And you're not worrying about how accurate these stitches are, whether they're the same length, whether the distance apart is the correct length, in inverted commas. It's just about what this feels like in your fabric. Your fabric in your fingers and the thread in your hand, and it's just enjoying that motion, and it can be quite calming just doing the same repetitive action over and over again. You get into a bit of a rhythm with it. You can just concentrate on what you're doing, you can forget everything else. And when I get to the end, just going to turn it round, and I'm going to go back the other way. I'll just zoom in a little bit on this so you can see a little bit closer what I'm doing. And you can do your running stitch either in one action, so you can go in and out and in and out, which is the way you would do sashiko. Or you can go down into the fabric and up and down. So you can do it in two movements if you want to, or you can just do in and out of the fabric. It'll give you quite a different look, and I would stick to one. Try a little bit and see of each and see which one you like, but I would stick to one because then that gives you that repetitive sort of motion that's really nice with doing something like this. I've done a couple of rows. I really enjoyed just sitting there doing that, actually. It's the middle of winter here, but the sun is actually out and the birds are tweeting, and Ginger Cat's just sat there nice and quietly, and I've enjoyed just doing a few stitches, and I've only done a few rows, so it is really beautiful to do. So I'm just going to turn this over and show you how to finish the thread on the back. So I'm just going to slide it between the two layers. I'm just going to slide my needle through there, and I usually come out where there's a stitch. Just check on the other side it's not come all the way through. And I can just cut that off. That feels really lovely. And then when I want to start a new one, it's a knot on the back, and I can just come between the layers, come up where I want to start, and carry on stitching. So that is all there is to it. You can see how it's got neater as I've gone on. So I've got it more of a rhythm, really. It's not really about being neat, but it's about finding that rhythm and just finding that nice action, that nice motion with your stitches. So you can see the first two are a bit warming up. And then I've just got into this nice rhythm with it and just stitching away down there. So let's have a look at a few more and a couple of different samples that I've got for you. So this is one that I am just stitching in the evening every now and again, and this is quite a special piece of fabric because I this was a piece of plain calico, and I've actually spent quite a lot of time changing it. So I put lots of pins in it, and then I've sprayed it with, I dyed it with tea, so I put some tea bags on it to change the colour and make it this sort of much more interesting colour. And then I've put some pins in it, and I sprayed it with some vinegar, and the pins have rusted a bit. So this has been through quite a lot of processes, this piece of fabric, and I thought, well, what shall I do with it? I thought this is the perfect thing for this technique, because I've kind of put quite a lot of work into this bit of fabric. It sort of means something to me, and I kind of want to see the fabric as it is, rather than stitching over it and turning it into something. So I've been doing this one here. I've just got my plain piece of linen on the background. You can see the stitches there on the background. I'm just using this thread here that I've also dyed as well. This has also been hand dyed, and I've just gone back and forth. So just as I've started that one that I've shown you, gone back and forth with my stitches here, and I've just done some in a different direction. As I feel like going in a different direction, I jumped to the end and I did the same here. This one's going round in a spiral, actually, quite like my spirals, and I did a couple down the edge as well. And I'm just working back and forth here, and these were some little bits of lace that I actually pinned to the piece of fabric when I made it, so they've been dyed as well. I just put a couple of those in because they were all part of that same process. They were connected to the fabric already. So that's one that I am working on at the minute. And I also have this piece of fabric that I rust dyed. So this is Rusty Nails. I think this is an amazing piece of fabric. So this went through a similar process, but I put some nails on it, and the nails have rusted into the fabric. And I wanted to use that in it as well, but I thought it's really nice. I don't actually want to stitch all over this one, but I thought I might put it with it, because it's again part of that process, and I might just sew it in the top, and then I can roll it up with that piece around it, and that's part of it. And that's really nice tactile. It's got a little story to tell as well. So I think I'll put that one with it. But you can see my stitching is super simple. Just that running stitch back and forth in different directions. So let's unravel these ones and have a little look at this one here. So this one I eco-dyed. So these are actually vine leaves. And you can hammer the vine leaves onto the fabric, and the colour will transfer from the leaves to the fabric. They've actually changed colour quite a bit. They were much more green than that, and the green has gone, but it's left this beautiful print of these leaves. And again, just the print itself was lovely. Didn't really want to do anything with that. I thought, oh, this will be a nice piece of fabric to do this with. And I haven't done running stitch this time. I've just sort of done little seeding stitches, but I've done them in rows. I've got that rhythm going with my rows still, but just altered where I put my stitches, so they're not all in a straight line. So just a little bit of interest in there. Again, with a thread dyed with the leaves as well. I transferred the colour onto the thread as well, and stitching with the thread, and just got my cotton on the back. But they feel really beautiful. I wish you could feel what they look like, because they're just lovely things to touch. And we're usually told, don't touch your embroidery, and look after it and wrap it up and cover it up. So it's really nice to have something that you can actually touch and feel. And then there's another little one that I've done here. So it's got slightly different direction, my stitches, but it's all still running stitch. And I haven't filled it all in. So again, this was a little eco printed one that I did. Didn't come out very well, this, but you can just see where the prints of the leaves were. So I've just sort of used that, but again, just running stitch, some spirals, attached another bit of fabric there because I ran out, and another bit of fabric down the middle. So there's a bit of that seeding and a bit more running stitch. I haven't done it over the whole thing. I've just gone down the whole length of it there, and that is on a single layer, so no backing on fabric on that. I thought I would just try it without. Didn't enjoy stitching that so much. I like the firmer surface to work on, but by all means try it on one piece. And then you've got this beautiful, amazing textile that's got lots of texture to it, and you can roll that up and make your little scrolls out of it. So I just want to show you a couple more things as well to put it in context, because if you are somebody who wants to make something out of this, it's not the point of it, but if you do want to, I'm going to show you a couple of samples where things have been made from this technique. So I mentioned sashiko thread earlier. So this is a piece that I have done, and this would have been a traditional Japanese face cloth called a zokin. and they would use the leftover pieces of fabric, their worn out fabrics from their clothing, and this was kind of the end of the line for those pieces. When they couldn't repair the clothing anymore, they would layer up the pieces together and they would put all this stitching through, and they would make a cloth, and they could use it for cleaning, the little cleaning cloth, really, to really get the last out of the fabric. But you can see the stitches in this. This is the stitch that I use, and just back and forth with this really strong thread. This is a yellow one, but it's the same thread here. So this really strong thread, and the closer you put your stitches together, the stronger your piece of fabric is. So you've still got this sort of mindful action of doing this running stitch. And they were making, you know, good use of every last bit of fabric. So these are not quick to do, but there was a sort of this necessity that they needed to use this fabric because fabric was expensive to buy, but also this kind of action of stitching it together as well and making something new out of it. So I thought that was quite interesting to see what I've just done, but for something that has a purpose. And you can also see that in the Indian culture with a little bit of cantha. So I'll show you a bit of that. So this is a similar idea, and then they would take the saris, so worn out saris that couldn't be used anymore, and they would layer them on top of each other. And there's actually loads in here. There's loads of different layers of saris, probably about 5 or 6 in there, and they layered them up together. That's actually a different one there, you can feel that. Can feel the layers in it, and they would make a new piece of fabric, and they would turn these into quilts. But again, you can see this stitching, this rows and rows of this stitching to put these together, and they would have taken a long time to make these, but using up those scraps of fabric, making everything go as far as possible. So if you've got some bits and pieces of fabric left that are from something that are old, that haven't got a use anymore, you could use those. That would be really nice for this, because you're making something with it as well as enjoying that process of stitching. So they would just sew all of these saris together, and they'd have another lease of life as a blanket as well. So I thought those two samples were really interesting to show you some of that stitch and some of that idea in context. So I hope you've been inspired to have a little go at some mindful meditation embroidery. It really is lovely just to have that connection and get that connection back with your materials. And if you're starting out in embroidery, it's a really good way just to get doing some stitching and get practicing some stitching without worrying what it's going to be and what the end result is going to be. So if you would like to know about slow stitching and you haven't discovered that yet, you can check out our playlist on that. Lots of videos on that technique here. And if you want to see how I made my sensory fabric book, you can see that on my other channel. Click this video down here to go and see that one. Thank you for watching, everyone. If you've enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. I'll see you next time.